Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to do just a kind of quick overview of our last chapter, which is chapter 10. It's called En el consultorio. The consultorio is literally like the consultation room. It means the doctor's office. If you think about it, when you go to see the doctor, when you go to the doctor's office, you're not really in his office. You're not with his computer and his papers. You're in the examining room. So that's what a consultorio is. So in chapter 10, you're going to talk about medical conditions, parts of the body, health, well-being, things like that. Keep in mind that for your last composition, you'll be incorporating elements of chapter 9 and chapter 10. Um, so one thing that we'll see is the past tense is in both of these chapters. So thematically, it's kind of hard to incorporate both celebrations and medical stuff, but it'll be easier for you to incorporate more of your grammar, preterite, and imperfect. Okay. Okay, so we'll get into chapter 10 is our last chapter for Spanish 102. Parts of the body. A lot of medical terms are in English and in Spanish are rooted in Latin. So if you have a good sort of medical vocabulary, it'll help you with your Spanish. For example, corazón. You could think of it like coronary. Or pie, like podiatrist. Dedo, your digits. Estómago, your stomach. We're not going to get a lot into more in-depth stuff, but eventually we're going to see things, or you will see things like pulmones are your lungs, like a pulmonologist. Or kidneys are riñones, like renal. So there's a connection there, and that connection is Latin. Look at this word, farmacia. One of your culture sections is about the difference between pharmacies in the United States and in other countries. In other countries, you can do a lot more in a pharmacy. A pharmacist in other countries can almost like treat you. You go in there and tell them your symptoms, and you can buy things like antibiotics over the counter. And we know that those sorts of things require prescriptions here in the US. We have some symptoms, some illnesses, some medicines. A lot of the verbs related to these are reflexive. Um, Sometimes it's hard to visualize why hurting your foot is reflexive, but it still is. When you talk about something aches, you're going to use duele. For example, me duele la cabeza. Think of this doler almost like a verb like gustar. Something else to think about is what is a symptom, what is a diagnostic tool, and what is a treatment. For example, a symptom might be sneezing, a diagnostic tool would be like an x-ray, and then the treatment would be the actual medicina. Something to think about. This is always a good activity, just a refresher of where accents fall. So I encourage you to read through this section. Strong syllables is what it's called. In the fotonovela, it looks like someone is sick. It looks like Jimena has coronavirus. Just kidding, too soon. So we're going to see how she seeks treatment from El Doctor Melendez. How y'all feeling, by the way? I have never felt better. This talks a little bit about health services. This is a very topical issue. Uh, Pretty much every country in the world, including, as far as I know, all Spanish-speaking countries have um, sort of a public health system, meaning healthcare is free to low to no cost. In the United States, we have a largely privatized health system, meaning healthcare is very expensive, and in most cases, you have to have insurance to pay for it. This is a very controversial issue and something that is on a lot of people's minds as of time of recording, a presidential election is coming up. So the idea that it's a human right to get affordable health care. And believe it or not, there are people. I'm not taking issue on either side. Don't come with me. Don't come to me. Don't at me. But there are people who say, you know, if you're sick, you should get health care whether you can afford it or not. And then there are other people who say, well, it's like any service. If you can't pay for it, you can't have it. So In most Spanish-speaking countries, it is free to low cost. So something else to think about. Okay, I've said this before, but sometimes these chapters will give you something that's sort of a heavy lesson, and then for the other lessons, they'll kind of pull back. One thing is chapter 10 is the first lesson with only 3 grammars. So from now on, if we were to continue for chapter 11, 12, 13, you'd see there's only 3 grammars. The heavy grammar for this one is the imperfect tense. It is a different past tense from the preterite. The preterite is the past tense that was what happened. This occurred, and then this occurred, wham, bam, etc. The imperfect is sort of a softer past tense. The perfect is like what used to happen, or what was happening. What was it like? We're going to use the imperfect to talk about things that happened repeatedly in the past, or things that were happening, or to describe things in the past. It is not the same as the preterite. The preterite would be, on this day I did this, she did this, they did this, bam, bam, bam. The imperfect is, it was a beautiful day, everyone was outside, the birds were singing, it was May 5th. It's more descriptive and ongoing in nature. The most common use of the imperfect is to say used to. If you used to do something, you did it many times. We're not going to use it with the preterite in the same, like to tell a story, for example. To tell a story, you'd have to jump back and forth. What we're going to do is treat them separately. So get ready for your composition to have a preterite section and then an imperfect section. So the preterite may be, one Christmas we did this. The imperfect section might be, every Christmas when I was growing up, we used to always do this. So the imperfect is a different past tense from the preterite, and it usually expresses used to. Constructions with se. So we've seen se in the context of reflexive verbs. It's also used in other ways in Spanish, non-reflexively. And one of the ways it's used is called the impersonal se. And it's just a way to say what people do, what one does, what you do. In English, we'll say they or you, but I don't really mean you. For example, if I go, what do they speak in Peru? Well, who's they? What I really mean is like, what is spoken? What is done in a laboratory? That's a construction that we would use. The construction is se plus the singular, third-person singular form of the verb, or the third-person plural of the verb, depending on what is done. It's a really easy thing. For example, se habla español means they speak Spanish, one speaks Spanish, Spanish is spoken. You're not saying who does it. You're